officially begin in 5 minutes. While we wait for everyone, I would like to invite esteemed guests who have already entered the meeting room to take a moment to say hi in the chat box to everyone. And let us know where you are from. Introduce yourself briefly so we can get to know you. Thank you. Attendees from home and abroad, as well as friends watching the live stream, greetings and welcome to the UN NGO CSW, Eliminating the Intersectional Microaggressions of Ethnicity, Age, and Gender Forum. We are delighted to see many of you who care deeply about this issue join us today. I'm Fresa Huang, the Secretary General of Here Gung Ho Association. On behalf of the host, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you for taking the time to participate in this 2-hour international forum, where we will talk about the topic of clarify and identify the form and impacts of gender-related microaggressions observed in practical context, and how to carry out specific and effectively social education and public awareness promotion. I'm confident that we will have a fruitful exchange today. Before the officially start the forum, to ensure smooth proceedings, I would like to remind all participants to please mute your microphones and turn off the camera throughout the session. Audio and video recording of the entire process is prohibited. This forum will be conducted in English, but simultaneous interpreting between English and Mandarin is available today. The link to the live stream will be posted in the chat box for sharing. Additionally, if you have any questions or wish to share your perspectives during the forum, feel free to leave them in the chat box. And if you are watching the Chinese live broadcast channel on YouTube, can also submit your question via the Slido link. Our team will compile them for discussion with the speakers during the Q&A session. Furthermore, if you encountered any issues during the forum, you can also raise them in the chat box, and our staff will assist you promptly. Once again, thank you for your cooperation. Now it's time to get started. First, let's welcome our forum moderator, Cecilia Lee. Everyone, please hit the reaction button at the bottom of your screen to send a wave of hearts or applause to welcome Cecilia.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Cecilia Lee. So I have to introduce myself first. I have been a feminist since I was a university student, and I have worked in the Garden of Hope Foundation as a women's rights campaign specialist and worked in the Foundation for Women's Rights Promotion and Development as a researcher. And now I'm an independent activist. It's my great pleasure to be the moderator of this meaningful event, and I really look forward to today's discussion. To begin our event, I would like to first welcome Ms. Mei Zhen Li, the Commissioner of the Department of Social Welfare, New Taipei City Government, to give opening remarks. Please.
Distinguished guests from around the world, ladies and gentlemen, good local time. I am Mei Zhen Li, Commissioner of the Social Welfare Department of New Taipei City Government. First, I would like to express my sincere gratitude that our department has the opportunity to co-host this meaningful forum with the Here Gung Ho Association. Today, we will discuss the topic of eliminating the intersectional microaggressions of ethnicity, age, and gender, a critical issue that concerns everyone's life and the future. Gender discrimination exists not only in obvious violations and violence, but also shows up in small, everyday actions and comments in our daily lives. These microaggressions may seem harmless, but unknowing hurt every individual experiencing them. Being in such an environment long-term can not only weaken our confidence and opportunities, but also lead to collective negative perceptions, thereby hindering both personal and social development. For today's forum, we have the great honor of inviting Tiffany Overwood from the U.S. and the NGO representative from Taiwan, including Secretary General Ya Chun-zhou from the Friendly to All Co-Parenting Organization and the CEO Annie Zheng from the Well-Planned Organization of New Taipei City. Together, we will share their insights on gender microaggression in workplace, school, female entrepreneurship, and social media. The boundaries of microaggression are often blurred, making them difficult to recognize, and causing us to overlook this profound impact on our lives. Once again, thank you all for your attention to this issue. Let us discuss, reflect, and work together to create a more fair and respectful society. Each of us can exert our influence in this process and contribute to change the progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee, for your opening remarks. Now, it's time to introduce our three distinguished speakers. First is Tiffany Alvoyd. She is the attorney and lecturer in the TCA Forums and Instruction LLC. Tiffany has 10 years of experience as an in-house workplace investigator across various industries. She helps companies create a more inclusive work environment, and her training has earned widespread acclaim for its unique approach, perspective, and impact. Welcome, Tiffany. Thank you for being us. And the second speaker is Yachun Zhou, the Secretary General of the Friendly to All Co-parenting Organization. She previously was the part-time lecturer of the Interdisciplinary Program of Humanities and Social Science in National Tsinghua University and the General Education Center in National Donghua University, focusing on feminist theories and gender education. Welcome, Yachun. It's nice to have you here. Okay, our third speaker is Annie Zhang. Annie Zhang is now the CEO of Well-Planned Foundation. She previously served as the founder and executive director of the International City Wanderer Education Association and the director of the Against Wind Association. In 2017, she was selected for the Forbes 30 Under 30 Asia as a social entrepreneur and Prestige 40 Under 40. Welcome, Annie. Thank you for joining us. So, before we move to our speakers' presentations, please allow me to first explain why we have this session today. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration. Today, many people, at least in Taiwan, believe that we have achieved gender equality because now women have higher educational level, because women can have their own career, and because women don't want to get married or have kids, just want to focus on themselves to get their self-fulfillment. And in Taiwan, we had a female president. We are the first country legalizing same-sex marriage in Asia. And according to the Gender Inequality Index, Taiwan ranked 7th globally and 1st in Asia. Sounds very great. But have we really achieved gender equality? Has the society been equal and inclusive enough? That's an important question. So that's why we have to talk about microaggressions. Microaggression is the indirect and subtle and sometimes unintentional form of discrimination that marginalized groups, including women, experience every day. It reflects the stereotypes, biases, and unequal power relations that are deeply rooted in our society. Although we may have laws and regulations that seem to be able to protect women and other marginalized groups, the existence of microaggressions continue to reinforce various forms of inequality and cause anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem in the targeted individuals. However, the problem is that microaggressions are so subtle and occur so naturally in our daily life that people may take it for granted. And even those who suffer from microaggressions may not be fully aware of the harm imposed on them, or they may not be sure how to resist it. So let's get started. Tiffany, you have worked with companies for a long time, helping them to build a non-discriminatory and inclusive workplace. What are the microaggressions that may happen in our work environment?
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. I'm really excited to share the U.S. perspective on microaggressions. So as was so eloquently queued up before me, I want to do a little bit of a definition of a microaggression. The definition that I like to use is a little bit shorter. So a microaggression is an insult or dismissive behavior that is rooted in stereotype and is directed at someone because of their membership within a marginalized group. And when we're talking about a marginalized group, we're usually talking about someone who is over the age of 40 here in the United States, someone who's a person of color, someone who may have a disability, or it could also be women. We're usually talking about someone who has historically faced some kind of exclusionary behavior. They've been disenfranchised in some way. And because of that history of oppression, there's comments or there's behavior that's being directed towards them because of that. And today, I know during this presentation, we're focusing primarily on race, gender, and age. So that's what I'm going to focus on in my part of the speech. It's important for us to understand that microaggressions, they really originate from bias and stereotypes that people have about other people. And I won't go into detail about this because another one of the people on the panel is going to go into detail about who came up with this term. But just in general, it was originated by Dr. Chester Middlebrooke Pierce, and Daryl Wing Sue is someone who's done a lot more work on it recently. One term I do want to spend a little bit of time on because I think it helps us understand microaggressions better is the term intersectionality. And so that term intersectionality was created by a Black woman. Her name is Kimberly Crenshaw. She's a law professor at UCLA and also at Columbia. And she actually was one of my teachers when I was at UCLA. And in 1989, she wrote a law review article. And the article was called Demarginalizing the Intersection of Race and Sex, a Black feminist critique of anti-discrimination doctrine, feminist theory, and anti-racist politics. And in that article, she makes a unique point that was lost on a lot of people. She talks about how there were several cases where African-American women were being discriminated against in the workplace. And so they decided to go to court to try to get justice and to try to, right this wrong that has happened to them. But in both instances of them doing this, and the court denied their case. And the court basically was saying, we're comparing you to other Black people in the workplace, other Black men. Black men are able to be successful in the workplace. Therefore, we don't believe that you're being discriminated against. They were also being compared to other women in the workplace. So the court was saying, we're looking at other white women in the workplace. They're able to be successful in the workplace. Therefore, we don't think that you're being discriminated against. And what Professor Crenshaw pointed out when we're thinking about intersectionality is that it wasn't just that they were Black or that they were a woman that they were being discriminated against. It was that unique status of them being both, that intersection of the two. And so in this particular session that we're talking about today, we're talking about that intersection of being a woman, maybe being a woman of color, maybe being an age that sometimes faces discrimination in the workplace. And the reason why Professor Crenshaw called it intersectionality was because she compared it to a four-way stop, where there may be an accident that's happening where, there's a four-way stop where there's cars coming from four different directions. And there's an incident that happens in the middle where there's two things that are intersecting. And so here she was saying it's this intersection of being a woman and also a woman of color that was causing people to be discriminated against. And for some reason, the court didn't have the ability to see that unique situation was what was the genesis of the discrimination. One thing I wanted to share, a quote that Professor Crenshaw said about intersectionality that I think is very, very helpful. She says that intersectionality is a lens, a prism for seeing the way in which various forms of inequality often operate together and exasperate each other. We tend to talk about race inequality as separate from inequality based on gender, class, sexuality, or immigration status. What's often missing is how some people are subject to all of these, and the experience is not just the sum of its parts. And this was a quote from Times Magazine, in case anyone wants to look that up. But in terms of the term in intersectionality, it's now been expanded. It's not just, for describing discrimination that's happening to Black women. Now it's used a lot more expansively to include, someone's not only their race, but their class, their sexual orientation, if they have a disability, and also their age. And so as we're moving along here, because I know my time is moving along, I do want to spend a little bit of time just sharing some of the US laws and the social movements that have happened in the United States, because I think it helps give us a little perspective as to why some phrases are offensive. Because as I stated before, microaggressions a lot of times are based on bias or stereotype, and someone is actually operating off of a bias or a stereotype that they have about someone, and it's coming out in the way that they're talking or behaving toward that person. And a lot of times that bias and that stereotype actually originates from things that happened back historically. And so I do want to spend a couple times talking about a couple things that I think you may all find useful. So when we're thinking about the history in the US of women in the workplace, the first place I wanted to start was 1619. Now, 1619, the year 1619 is actually a pretty pivotal year for the US. The United States was one of many countries that participated in the transatlantic slave trade. And as we all know, if we're thinking about enslaved people, those people are working, but they're not being paid. Their wages are being stolen from them. And so that's why I wanted to start there, because that to me is the beginning of a workplace, but unfortunately people's wages are being taken from them. We're also thinking about this time period from 1619 to 1865. That's when slavery ended in the United States. During that period, there's millions of people that are being enslaved. Their wages are being taken. They have no control over their life. They're being subjected to sexual assault. Their lives are basically being stolen from them in addition to the wages. We also see the destruction of the Black family happening during this period. And so there's a lot happening here in this time period as it relates to, we're thinking about the workplace and how people are being treated. And again, the reason why I wanted to start here too is because a lot of the stereotypes that are labeled on Black people and Black women, a lot of them originate from this time period, because those stereotypes and that bias about Black people were being used to justify oppressing them. So for example, there's stereotypes that originate at this time about Black people as a group being inept in some way or less than human, but at the same time, they're being entrusted to care for children or to cook food or to engage in a multitude of other tasks that required high skill. So again, we see stereotypes and bias being used as a justification to oppress people. And that's one of the things that's pretty dangerous about microaggressions, that they're not something subtle or something small, or they are kind of a big deal, because when we're thinking about them in the workplace, they're being used in the same way to be oppressive, to maybe not want to promote someone or to justify why someone is not worthy of being in a leadership position, or not being worthy of getting a promotion. So we have to be careful about how dangerous these perceptions about people can be. And then we move right along to the women's rights movement, which starts in 1848. And at that point, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, she and a couple other women draft something called the Declaration of Sentiments. And at this time, there's many things on this list, but some of the things that they're listing that they feel aggrieved about on the behalf of women is that women at this time are not allowed to vote. Married women have no property rights. Anything that they own or is given to them, their husband actually owns on their behalf. At this time, husbands have legal power and responsibility for their wives to the extent that they can imprison or beat their spouse without being punished. Divorce and child custody laws favored men at this time, giving no rights to women. Most occupations at this time were closed to women. And when women did work, they were paid only a fraction of what men earned. And there were more and more things, but I also want to kind of divide here too, that this is kind of a certain experience that some women in the US were having. There were other experiences that I just talked about where women were working. They were actually doing a lot of work. And were not getting paid for it. So there were definitely two different experiences that women were having at that time. But again, all of them were under the umbrella of oppression in some way. And then we have women's suffrage that came in 1920, and that was giving women the right to vote. We have the Equal Pay Act of 1963, which eliminated pay disparity, or supposed to eliminate pay disparity. At that point, it made it illegal to pay someone differently based on their gender. And then we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was a pretty significant law as we think of the workplace, because it allowed people to find, to have a legal way to sue if they're being discriminated against because of their gender. The other thing I want to point out about microaggressions is that if there's a collection of microaggressions happening in the workplace, it can get to a point where it's considered to be a hostile work environment. And at that point, there's opportunities for people who are subjected to them to actually take legal action and try to get justice in the courts. Then we have the Age Discrimination Act in 1967, and that makes it illegal to discriminate against someone in the workplace because they're over the age of 40. And then we have in October 2017, the Me Too movement. Now, I want to say I just ran through a lot of things, and there were quite a few things I left out, but because of time, we can't go through every single thing, but I tried to hit the high moments. But as it relates to the Me Too movement, that was pretty important to the as far as the workplace here in the United States. Because there was a lot of, prior to that, there was a lot of sexual harassment and other inappropriate behavior that was happening, and it really wasn't really being addressed. And activist Tarana Burke, she is an African-American woman. Back in 2006, she actually made a post on MySpace, and she used that hashtag #MeToo. And was talking about being abused, and she actually is a sexual assault survivor. And then in 2017, Alyssa Milano uses that same Me Too phrase to talk about sexual harassment that is happening as it relates to the entertainment industry. And then from there, it turned into an entire movement where you see women coming forward with empathy, solidarity, and strength in numbers to try to get rid of these situations where people are being sexually assaulted, harassed, and mistreated in the workplace. And so basically, with the purpose of me sharing some of these things is to basically share that the laws and social movements that I just shared, they were enacted to, in an effort to try to protect women from discrimination. And also, I wanted to highlight some of the historical oppression that women have had to overcome. Women have made some tremendous progress. Here in the US, though, there has been a feeling amongst at least some people that we're going backwards rather than forwards as it relates to some women's rights. One example is the 2022 overturning of Roe v. Wade in the United States. That's when our Supreme Court held that there's no constitutional right to an abortion. And so now states in the United States may make getting an abortion illegal in their state, even if someone has a medical need for one. I also wanted to just highlight a Gallup survey that I saw last week that talked about the perception of respect as it relates to men and women here in the US. And it was kind of surprising in terms of perception. It said that there's 58% of Americans who currently say they feel that women are treated with respect and dignity. But there was, as it related to, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. What I meant to say was that there was an 18 percentage point gap separating men and women on if people are being, if women are being respected. So in 2024, because this was a survey from the end of the year of last year, 49% of women said that they felt like women were being respected, and 67% of men felt that women received respect and dignity. So it was a little interesting that men tend to think that women are getting more respect than women actually are feeling or and seeing, which could be you know, an issue in the workplace again if we're seeing that people have a perspective, you know, women have a perspective of maybe not getting the respect that they feel like they should deserve, or they deserve, or that they should be getting. There's a perception from men that they are getting that respect. And so I think I'm almost at my time, so I will stop here. But I did have a couple examples in a slide that I want to share really quickly. Let me see if I can get my slide up fast. And these are just a few examples of, just a quick example of what can consider to be a microaggression in the workplace. A male colleague is talking over or interrupting a female colleague when she's trying to make a point. And if we're thinking about what I just talked about, like historically, some of the oppression that women have faced, you know, we can think back, like there was a time when women actually could not even, you know, could not own property, could not speak, could not vote. And so some of this being interrupted by someone else or someone talking over them kind of stems back from that original oppression. And then this next one, let's see, a colleague says the following to a woman: you sound so angry and aggressive. This is another example of sometimes a woman is being assertive, but instead of that being perceived as being assertive, sometimes it's being labeled as being aggressive, where if a man was behaving in the exact same way, it wouldn't even be acknowledged. That would be acceptable, but because she's acting out of the norm of what is considered to be normal or acceptable behavior for a woman, sometimes it gets a negative label. And so I will stop there to let my other colleagues speak, but thank you for the time.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you for elaborating on the importance of intersectionality in relation to microaggressions. And I think you really point out an important thing, that microaggressions based on stereotypes are not really micro, because they will be used as a justification to oppress people. And that you say that the stereotypes based on the oppression, the history of oppression now still exists in our workplace. I think this is a really important point. Oh, sorry, I forgot to open my camera. Yeah, and yeah, so, and I think this is an important problem, not only happening in workplace, but also other spaces. So I would like to invite Ya-Chun. Do you think this also happen in schools? I know now in Taiwan, gender equality education has been compulsory for high school students, but it seems that gender microaggressions still occurs on campus every day. Could you share your observations and thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Cecilia. Hello, everyone. I'm Ya-Chun Zhou, Secretary General of Friendly to All Co-parenting Organization. It is my great honor to speak to you about microaggressions on campus and their impact. Thanks for Tiffany for introducing the context in the US. So I'll start from the local context of Taiwan. In Chiwang Deila, a scholar who raises people's awareness of microaggressions, she focuses primarily on endogenous studies. She points out that microaggressions often stem from the speaker having no ill intention and may even be perceived as well-intentioned remarks, but they are rooted in ignorance, misunderstandings, or stereotypes about unfamiliar groups. As a result, marginalized communities suffered from harm that is often difficult to articulate. As awareness of political correctness gradually increases, policies have also begun to address past injustice against indigenous people, leading to improvement in policy measures. However, microaggressions embedded in daily life and culture continue to cause harm, often met with accusations like "things are already equal now" or "you're too sensitive." A similar situation has occurred in the promotion of gender inequality gender equality education in Taiwan school. In 2004, Taiwan passed the Gender Equality Education Act, which has undergone multiple amendments over the past 20 years in response to change in education and social environments, with more comprehensive enforcement rule established. The act mandates the primary and middle schools provide 4 hours of gender equality education each year, and the curriculum guidelines of 12-year basic education requires the integration of gender equality education into teaching. As a result, young people under the age of 25 should have received varying hours of gender equality education in school. In terms of campus spaces, many guidelines for protection, reporting, and gender-specific spaces, such as lactation rooms and gender-friendly restrooms, have been established. Legal protection against sexual harassment or assault on campus have been strengthened, along with the creation of complaint mechanisms and consulting systems, making gender equality a significant issue in schools. However, despite the relatively comprehensive legal framework, many forms of gender microaggressions persist in the classroom. Now I'd like to share the microaggressions I have observed through my years of experience promoting gender equality education in school. One common form of microaggression on campus is verbal abuse, which is often disguised as jokes. These targeted may be labeled as lacking humor or overly politically correct. Swearing is a typical example. Educators noted that children are starting to swear at younger age. At younger ages due to the internet, family, and peer influences. More often than not, children swear without malice. They do it bond with each other or to fit into subcultures. Some even see swearing as an act of rebelling against authority, making it something cool. However, this kind of interpretation often overlooks the swearing targets women or marginalized groups with serious gender inequalities. For example, female genitals are often used as derogatory language, while references to male genitals are typically considered compliment. In addition, those who swear may view it as an act of rebellion against authority, but the means of rebellion often reinforce existing gender inequalities. While individuals targeted by such language can file complaints, this approach addresses the issue only on a personal level, especially when conflicts have already escalated into confrontations. These complaints are more likely to be seen as emotionally driven, making it harder to engage in deeper discussions about the cultural issue at play. If swearing represents an overt form of microaggression on campus, another type manifests as the invisible treatment of certain topics, most notably LGBTQ+ issues. In 2019, Taiwan legalized same-sex marriage, marking significant legal progress. However, the years leading up to this decision were fraught with heated debates between supporters and opponents. Since then, many primary and middle schools have either implicitly or explicitly instructed gender equality educators to avoid addressing these topics under the pretext of avoiding controversy. In other words, while regulation mandates the inclusion of LGBTQ+ education in gender equality curriculum, in practice, such content often remain unspoken, making LGBTQ+ identity invisible within the educational setting. Sexual orientation or identity are exploration exploration are crucial issues during adolescence. Yet the absence of open discussions in school forces many students to suppress their identities, subjecting them to prolonged stress that can adversely impact their mental and physical well-being. Another form of invisible existence is that of underage students who become pregnant or give birth. I put should not exist on the slide, and by that I'm referring to the prevailing academic-oriented culture in Taiwan, where anything deemed by adult to affect students' academic performance is considered abnormal. As a result, schools often adopt subtle measures to maintain a pure learning environment. For example, although the law explicitly guarantees students' right to education, when a student becomes pregnant, some top-ranking schools implicitly or explicitly pressure the student, often under the guises of "for your own good," to voluntarily transfer or to take leave, with phrases such as, it will be easier for you to take care of your child, or you need to rest during pregnancy. Schools believe that allowing pregnant students to remain in class would negatively impact the academic atmosphere, so they may arrange for home tutoring or isolate the student in counseling room, claiming to protect them from unwanted attention. In fact, for pregnant students, the school's primary concern is rarely their rights, but the fear that they might influence other classmates. Within this academic-oriented atmosphere, even if schools do not implement these subtle measures, pregnant students often feel like outsiders. For example, their classmates may cast curious glances, gossips about their private lives, or label them as promises. One pregnant student said, there's this atmosphere amongst classmates that makes you feel like your presence is disrupting their harmony. Eventually, you just don't want to go to school anymore. These examples show that those who take search for your own good action may not always act with malicious intent. Rather, what they do is often based on stereotypes or assumptions, believing they are helping others overcome foreseeable difficulties. However, these very acts of help become the source of profound unspoken hardship. Sometimes, misinterpretations by regulatory authority or social groups further reinforce microaggressions. In 2020, the Ministry of Education reported that the number of pregnant students have exceeded 1,000 for the first time in the previous year, with a 45% dropout rate among them. In media interviews, some NGOs serving children and youth easily attribute this phenomena to a rise of teenage mothers. However, a closer examination of Ministry of Education's data reveals that this increase was due to a more comprehensive reporting system that included adult students and those in continuing education programs. In simple terms, the statistics reflects whether the education system can provide adequate support to students of childbearing age. Yet, the misinterpretation of this data only reinforces false assumptions about teenage pregnancy and unfair moral judgment. This society still harbors the prejudice that students should look and act like students, and that being pregnant doesn't fit that image. Moreover, deeply misconceptions in society not only impact campuses, but also but also constructed distorted gender dynamics in the campus environment. At the end of 2024, the 30th anniversary reunion of alumni from Taipei Municipal Jianguo High School stirred up great controversy due to its menu selections. We can refer to this image. These are all Chinese homophobic puns, which are difficult to convey in English. Basically, the names of the dishes were filled with sexual innuendos targeting underage girls, ranging from objectifying fantasies to violent or assaultive language. When the menu was exposed online, the school's alumni association responded by calling it juvenile humor or insisting that no real person was harmed. However, this defense disregarded how invisible harm, those without a clear victim, can reinforce gender discrimination even more effectively. Later, it was also revealed that the event included all AI-generated life-size cardboard cutouts of female high school students in uniforms. Once again, the Alumni Association dismissed criticism by claiming they are not real people. This case highlights that in the digital age of internet, such virtual representation and the blending of virtual and real worlds makes it difficult to define who the victim is, which further deepens the harm caused by microaggressions. From these examples, we can see that elimination microaggressions in educational system requires more than just moral appeal. It fundamentally hinged on the construction of accurate knowledge. In other words, creating a diverse and gender equal campus is an intellectual task. It is not just about being a good person, but about being a knowledgeable person. Thank you for listening. This is my presentation.
Thank you, Ya-Chun. Thank you for providing so many real examples of microaggressions on campus. And like language-based violence and the denial of the existence of LGBTQ+ students, and the way pregnant students are treated as troublemakers or seen as like girls who are too easy. And I especially want to echo with you that women are often forced to accept those men's jokes that have some sexual implications. And when we express our discomfort, we will be accused of lacking a sense of humor. And I think it seems like this kind of situation has been around us since we were girls in schools. So, Annie, now it's your turn. As an entrepreneur, have you ever also encountered this kind of situation, especially when you were starting your own organizations? Or what kind of microaggressions a young woman may face in this quote-unquote overly feminist society, as men call it?
Hi, this is Annie. Thank you, Celia, for introducing me. And I have to say thank you, Tiffany, for just sharing a lot of background about what's happening in America. And also thanks for Ya-Chun for showing us the photo that you all just saw. The reason why I point out the photo because that actually linked to my story. So in my so later on through this talk, I will explain something more personal to all of you because what I'm gonna share is more personal experience. So I'm a female entrepreneur and I'm also a survivor of sexual violence. So you can see the photos on the slides. So this is my up and down in the past 10 years. So back to the time, so after listening to the history in America and get a kind of like a general understanding about what's happening in Taiwan. So in my case, I think it's like a good time to listen to a personal case. So back to 10 years ago, I just graduated from the university. As a fresh graduate, I was so passionate on education. And I was long for doing a nonprofit organization in order to promote the youth education in Taiwan. But based on that, I didn't have enough funding to do the nonprofit organization, which leads to my daily life. I have to go to everywhere to look for funding, and I have to pitch my projects to everyone I can meet at the time, to all the businessmen, to all the managers, to all different parties in the society as a young entrepreneur. That's common. I wasn't complaining about that. But the point is, when I walk into a business meeting as a 22-year-old young entrepreneur, who I met was usually middle-aged businessmen, middle-aged entrepreneurs. They are very experienced, mainly are male. And what I have to face is when I walk into the meeting room, people saw me and they said, "Oh, how young you are. And we didn't expect that you could be that young." And then after that, they asked me, "Why didn't you wear makeup?" Because they thought it's very important for you to wear makeup to show your respect to the others. However, they are not applying this principle to the other men. So as a young person, I have to learn how to wear makeup. And after I learned that, people started to ask me whether I'm single or not. Once they know I was single, they started to ask, "Oh, I know someone's son is single too. Should I introduce you to his son?" So I think at the time I was struggling with trying to make other people focusing on what I want to do and what my project is, instead of just how I look and what my relationship status is. It took me a lot of time to make other people focus on the thing I want to focus. So even more, some people would tell me like, "This nonprofit work sounds great, but I think you're just probably doing this for fun after graduation, right? Because you won't last long in this field." So all those words made me doubt myself a lot, because like people just is trying so hard to tell you, "Oh, you're too young, you're a female entrepreneur, so you will fail quickly." So after a while, like at one of these meetings, something worse happened. So I met a well-connected businessman, and people introduced me to him. And then we set up a one-on-one meeting, a fundraising meeting. I sent him all the documents, all the slides I want to use. And after I arrived there, he pulled out a thick stack of cash and asked, "Are you interested in being a sugar baby?" That's the only thing he asked me on that meeting. None of the words he asked about my project. Not even once he asked me about the funding proposal. So at the night, I realized that to some people, if a young woman agrees to a late night business meeting with a wealthy business manager, she must not really there for work. She must be looking for a sugar daddy. That's what I realized when I was 23. That experience actually shocked me. And I couldn't stop but doubting myself a lot. Would anyone ever take me seriously? Could I really build something meaningful through education? It was hard. But after like 7 to 8 years work, after I finally managed and stabilized my nonprofit, which also led to make me nominated as Forbes 30 under 30 in Asia as a social entrepreneur. All the microaggression didn't stop actually. So one time I remember after I became like 27, 28, I was invited to speak at a university in Taiwan about my entrepreneurial journal. So the professor was trying to invite me to inspire his students in the campus. And I do remember the way how he introduced me to the students. He said that, "Look at this young and brilliant woman. Most people like her would just try to marry into a rich family, but she actually chose to work in education and nonprofits. So impressive." Now I know he meant well. He was trying to give me the credit. However, hearing that, I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable, because it was like if the default expectation for a young, smart woman was to marry rich, and the fact that I didn't was somehow shocking to them. So that's the experience I had after I stabilized my startup. And So that's the experience related to my entrepreneurial journey. However, like just talk about the gender and the age, come to the gender side. Back into the college, when I was in the last year in the school, I was sexually abused. I was raped by someone I met in the campus. So after the assault, I was trying to speak up for myself. So after many years, I recovered. I think I thought I recovered from the trauma. I decided to share my experience online, just like what happened in America, the Me Too movement. I was trying to speak up myself. So I posted this experience online in 2020. And this is the comments I've received online. People doubt this experience. Someone even commented, "Are you just saying this experience to prove that you are attractive and beautiful?" That's what we have to face when we speak up for ourselves. Moreover, so the reason why I point out that Ya-Chun just showed us the photo, I don't know whether you still remember. If you still remember the photo, there are 3 girls on the photo, and one is in green. So that's the uniform from a high school called Taipei First Girl High School. That's the school I went to. That is a female high school in Taipei. People have fantasy about that school, so that's the reason why you saw that kind of photo show up in the just now. I still remember because of my work involves public speaking, and also because of my school, people had that fantasy. So I was once targeted by a Taiwanese crime group that secretly filmed women in the restroom, especially for the women who graduated from those schools or who is kind of well-known on the public, who can be found easily on the internet. So I was targeted. I was secretly filmed while I was giving the public speaking in a forum. And that case became a very famous crime case in Taiwan in just the past few years. Therefore, there are a lot of people discuss about this case online, especially recently, in the recent days. I still remember just a few days ago, someone was commenting about this case, this news. And I know that the person was angry, and the comments he left was like, "Those women are ruined because they were secretly filmed." When I saw that comment, I also know they meant well, and they was trying hard to stand with us, with the survivors. However, hearing those words made me feel like my life had already been defined and destroyed by what happened on me. But it shouldn't be that way. The real problem is those people who film, share, and view the private image without consensus. Not us. Survivors' life shouldn't and will not be destroyed by them. So, the last but not least, this is the quote I got from Barbie, the movie in 2023. You are supposed to stay pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much, or that you threaten other women because you are supposed to be a part of the sisterhood. So if I had to write my own version of this quote, it goes like, you have to be pretty, you have to be beautiful, but your makeup should look natural. You should get married and have kids and married to a rich family, but also have your own life and your own career. You should be good looking, but you can't benefit from your looks. You should work hard, but also make sure you look good while doing it. You should have a career, but also support your partner's career if it's your own. Doesn't those expectations sound a bit contradict to each other? It actually is, and this is what's happening in our life. We have to deal with all those social pressures. It's very exhausting. So to sum up my presentation, I think although microaggression sounds small, this might just sounds like a joke. But it actually not just words. It put on shame on us. It put on doubt on us. It makes us feel like whether I could still chase what I really want, whether I can be treated respectfully. So in the last, I really think it's the time to make a change. This is my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie, for sharing your personal stories. It was really touched, actually. What people imagine how victims look like also involve the gender stereotypes that may lead to gender microaggressions. And for your entrepreneur journey, that also leads me to come up with the statistics that in the United States, only 2% of the total venture capital funding goes to female-only funded startups, because investors, who are mostly men, may consciously or unconsciously prefer to invest in businesses that align with their own experiences or interests. And women founders are often facing the gender stereotypes and biases that may make them hard to gain the credibility and funding. And in your case, the fact that you were a young woman further reinforced their bias. And that's the intersection between gender and age. Okay, thank you for our 3 speakers' presentation. And now let me see if there is any question in the chat box. And okay, I see there's a question for Tiffany. Okay, so for Tiffany, thank you for your sharing. Based on your observations, do you think that the intersection of gender, age, and race, even the disability in the workplace, makes certain groups more susceptible to microaggressions or targets of discrimination? How can these individuals find supporters who can advocate for them in the workplace?
Thank you for that question. I would say that if there was a situation where someone is a member of multiple marginalized groups, there is a risk, there is a chance that they may be subjected to perceptions about their abilities because, as I kind of shared before, there is a history of people kind of assuming that people can't achieve certain things or that they're not capable of certain things. I wouldn't just assume that, but sometimes that does happen. I know what a lot of the organizations here in the United States, they have resource groups where they call them employee resource groups, and they're groups where it's a group of Black employees, or it's a group of employees that are allies or have a disability, and they have their own groups. And those are where people a lot of times go and get support and commiserate and kind of share about their experiences in the workplace. There's like a women's group as well, where women a lot of times will go there for support. So that's one place to get support. Another way to get support is if there is a situation where you're feeling like you're not being treated correctly at work. We do it, I do encourage people to try to go to HR, the Human Resource Department first, to try to get some kind of address the issue there. But if you aren't getting your needs met, it is okay to try to get external help, whether that be seeking an attorney, to just get information about what your rights are and what it is that you should be getting, or if you have a case. There's nothing wrong with doing that if you're not being treated the way that you should be treated in the workplace. But I try to encourage people to first have that conversation with your manager, then your HR department, and then if it's not going anywhere, to go ahead and seek external help.
Sorry, there's a technical problem. I don't know why I didn't show up on the screen, but my camera is actually open. But thank you, Tiffany. Thank you for your answer. I think that is very comprehensive and see that and pointed out that the challenges that people or discriminated may face. Yeah, and okay, did I show on the screen? No? Okay, anyway, but there is another questions, like there's another question. Thanks to all speakers for the impressive sharing. I would like to ask about how can we identify the boundaries of gender microaggressions? Since microaggressions are subtle and not overly discriminatory, how can we differentiate between microaggressions and behaviors that are considered acceptable or insignificant? Especially such statements and actions may be supported by some other people. Additionally, how can we tell children to recognize what constitutes a gender microaggression? So who gonna go first? Is anyone want to answer this question? Okay, Yachun, please.
Hi, 大家好。
Hello, allow me to respond to this question in English. So actually, we've been talking about the issue of boundary to our kids. Setting boundary is actually a lifelong issue, including microaggressions, because sometimes it's all about boundary setting. So what do we tell our kids? Of course, you need to respect personal boundary. That's the right thing to do, because sometimes you are just telling a joke. It may be an insult to other people. And when you need to apologize properly to the victim, expressing that you are not ill-intentioned. You need to be sincere in your apology. Thank you.
And okay, so Tiffany or any, would you like to answer?
Tiffany, do you want to go
I can-
first?
Oh, Annie, go ahead. Why don't you? Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
can
You
just
go.
go ahead.
Okay, maybe Tiffany first and then Annie.
That's a good question. I mean, sometimes it is kind of hard to know, am I being mistreated in this moment because of something I have no control over, such as, who I am as a person, what I look like, or is this just someone being rude? Or is this just a situation where someone is being ignorant? Sometimes it can be hard to tell. And that's why a lot of times I ask people, if you are in a situation where you feel like you're being mistreated, that you go have a conversation with the person to kind of understand, what is going on, and just telling them that, hey, the way that I'm interpreting what's being said and done to me, it feels, and I've actually said this to people, it feels very racialized. This conversation or what you said to me, or it feels very gendered. I don't want to accuse you of that, but that's kind of how it was feeling for me. Can you explain to me why you shared or why you did A, B, and C? And then sometimes when I hear their response to that, that kind of helps me understand more of the motive behind what it is being said. That being said, I don't have to address it as a microaggression or being rude. Either way, I can still address it the same way, just letting people know you're having a negative impact on me right now. I don't know if you knew that, but you're having a negative impact on me. I would prefer if, you didn't engage with me in this way, and this is the way I would prefer, and give an example of this is the way I prefer for you to engage with me. That still addresses it and doesn't make you have to try to figure out, well, I don't know why they said it. The fact of the matter is they said something offensive, and it's okay to address that.
Thank you, and thank you, Tiffany. And Annie?
So I would try to split this question into two scenario, like one in a working environment and one more in a private interpersonal situation. So in the working environment, I do strongly agree, like what just Tiffany suggested, goes to the HR, goes to your director, would help a lot sometimes, because you can clarify what just happened and also get some different perspective from different person. And also, for sure, you have to always find your support group. They might not be your colleagues. Sometimes they might be someone who works out of your company. They might just your friends. So in order to get that support, it's important to speak up your own experience to others and to mention what happened, what actually happened, and what your feeling was, and how did everyone react to that fact. So I think that's the way how we can clarify what actually happened and also get different perspective from different group, and then decide what you really want to do and what you want to achieve. Sometimes we just want to get apology, but sometimes we want to be treated differently. And that's the time we can try to figure out what's the best way to make that happen. So that's the thing I would suggest I would do in the working environment. But if it happened in the personal life, because there are no PR that you can talk to. So I would think that would be the time that we can sometimes still find the support group first, and then if it doesn't work, sometimes go on the public would be like one of the options we can choose, because we might need to find our peers from someone we don't actually know yet. So that might not just happen on you only, that also might happen on others. And in order to find those peers, we have to go to the support group to find to go to the NGO who focus on the gender issue or those discrimination issue, then we could find the peers there.
Okay, thank you for you all for answering the responding to the questions. I think one important thing is to help the children to set their body boundaries, to let them know what kind of behavior can be seen as a violation of my own body autonomy, and what kind of a situation is acceptable. And also the other important thing is that we have to start our conversation with the person that we feel we are offended, that we have to take the initiative to talk with them, to express our discomfort, and maybe we can negotiate what kind of behavior is acceptable for me. And the third thing, which is also very important, is also that you have to find your support groups, not only in your workplace, but also in your own environment, to find the peers that can recognize you, and you can work together to try to fight against the stereotypes or the gender-based microaggressions. So thank you for the answers. And so, okay, it's time to continue to the next part. Okay. Because after hearing so many different situations and forms of microaggressions, now we have to talk about how to cope with or to challenge those microaggressions. Annie, could you be the first one to share? For the situations you just talked about, do you have any response strategies? Or how did you adjust your mindset to face more of these kind of microaggressions?
Yeah, so thank you, Cecilia, for bringing me to this question. So the way how I handle those microaggressions, unfortunately, what happened on me at the time, I didn't have a HR manager that I can talk to because I was the entrepreneur. So the way how I deal with it, I talk about it. So I say how that make me feel to the person who gave me that microaggressions. And also I talked those experiences online, go on the public. Because whether they come from bad intentions or good intentions, I believe the world do need to hear what we actually feel and how those words actually affect us. And also the reason why I speak up myself, because I want people to know, like when a woman goes on a business meeting late at night, there are not some hidden agenda. She's just working hard to achieve her goal. And if a woman is secretly filmed, her life isn't over because of it. It shouldn't be, and it won't be. And we have to, I think I have to speak up for myself, to represent myself, in order to let other people know how those world become impactful, and what the appropriate word that I personally preferred. Every survivor is different. We might all want different things. And so the one important thing is we let them talk, we listen to them. So that's the thing I would do. And another way to respond to the microaggressions, besides speaking up, I think is the other way is to keep living better, to keep chasing what we truly want. So, for example, when the secret film happened on me, I knew it actually impacted me a lot because that happened while I was working. So while I was in the police station, while I was browsing those videos, I did doubt myself whether I should still do my work, whether I should still give another talk in the public in order to not get secretly filmed. But that's not what I really wanted. What I want is to just do my work and be professional and to pursue everything I want to achieve as my working goal. So no matter what people say, choosing to live life on our own terms and not letting those microaggressions to define us. I know it sounds ideally, it's not easy at all. I know it's hard. So the way how I went through is like I rely on the therapy, I rely on the reading, I rely on all those supporting groups. So after all those recovery, I can still keep my work. That's the reason why I'm still here to talk about my experience. But the whole process is the way how I cope this trauma, how I cope with those microaggressions. Because once we can get rid of those words and still focusing on what we want, I think this is the best way to react to those microaggressions.
Thank you, Annie. I agree with you that talking with the person and speaking up for myself is very, very important. But also, I think that this really needs the empowerment. I mean, because some women who are disempowered, they may don't lack this kind of strength to stand for herself, to speak up for herself. So empowerment for women is also very, very important. Okay, so Yachun, I believe education is the most fundamental stage that can foster our children's correct understanding of gender equality. What do you think is the most effective and feasible way to cope with microaggressions on campus?
Yeah, thanks, Cecilia.
Yeah, maybe you can share with us some good examples.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thanks. Okay, while our discussion has primarily focused on microaggressions in school, many of these issues stem from broader societal and cultural norms. And as we are not teachers, so a key question we must consider is how can we integrate gender equality into everyday life? In addition to bringing this discussion into schools, what opportunities exist to ensure that parents, children, and the general public are exposed to gender education in their daily lives? Since 2023, the Friendly to All Co-Parenting Organization has listed the underground level of the new Taipei City Plaza to establish the all-gender nest room. From the picture, you can see that, which has also become the new Taipei Gender Equality Base. This space houses Taiwan's only museum dedicated to diverse menstrual and reproductive health products and offers an extensive collection of books and picture books on gender equality, human rights, and parenting. One of its most unique features is the interactive sex education playground. At first glance, it appears to be a typical indoor play area, but it is designed to illustrate the journey of sperm meeting an egg. The playground is divided into two sections at different heights. In the background, what you see represents the female reproductive systems. In the foreground, what you see represents the males. There are guided audio tours or immersive educational sessions for the children, and the space also hosts various parent-child workshops like this. Okay. We also have a conference area where we host lectures, campus, and other interactive programs. Through these activities, we aim to make gender equality education an accessible part of everyday life for the general public. The integration of the conference and play area also allows parents with young children to participate in activities while also meeting their child care needs. For example, while parents attend sessions on how to talk to their kids about sex, their children can participate in age-appropriate activities led by instructors in the play area, and as you can see in the photo. We also organize workshops that help children recognize and reflect on everyday instances of inequality. Take our workshop on swear words, for example. Instead of conventional approach of simply prohibiting children from swearing, we encourage them to openly discuss the types of swear words they use, the contexts in which they say them, and the meanings of or interpretations behind these words. You can see how happy they were, showing me how to swear by gesturing. But through guided discussions, we help children examine the discriminatory elementary with certain swear words, fostering their ability to think critically and develop self-awareness and drive behavioral change. Our goal is to instill gender equality not just as a concept, but to be learned in the classroom, but as a principle that can be actively applied and reinforced in everyday life. In 2025, we published the Gender Equality Action Calendar, all-year daily calendar designed to integrate gender education into daily life. Each month focuses on a theme. For example, what is gender in January, online sexual violence in July, and gender equality laws in September. Under each theme, we provide a daily question and answer, offering parents and teachers a structured way to engage children in meaningful discussion and actions. We believe that eliminating microaggressions requires more than just acquiring the right knowledge. It must be actively applied in everyday life, not just in your mind, but in practice. You need to become someone who actively practices gender equality. The calendar was met with enthusiastic responses for teachers, parents, children, and even professionals. By breaking down complex gender issues into small, digestible Q&A segments, learning becomes more accessible. One teacher shared that he placed the calendar near the classroom's toothbrushing area, allowing children to read the day's question and answer while they brush their teeth. Some children were intrigued and even went on to explore related topics further. In short, microaggressions are embedded in everyday language and actions in ways that are often difficult to notice. We aim to replace gender discrimination with concrete practices of gender equality. By making these small actions part of our lives, we're gradually helping to change the culture. Thanks.
Thank you, Yachun. I think the activities you are doing are amazing and very creative. And I think this kind of interesting activities can also be more acceptable for the general public and even parents who may be more conservative, and they can apply what they learned to their daily life. And Tiffany, how about our workplace? We know that you are not only a lawyer, but also a trainer to help companies to create a non-discriminatory workplace. So according to your experience, what kind of training do you think is most important or effective to combat workplace microaggressions? And have you actually seen companies making real changes? Do you have any success stories to share?
Thank you so much for that setup. And I will say that as far as trying to address this in the workplace, that training is an effective way to try to address some of the inequality that we see in the workplace, because some of this is based on ignorance. People just don't know. And so I will guide people if they're interested in getting a training for your company. My email, or not email, my website is tiffanyalvoy.com if you're interested in looking into that. But in addition to training, there's also other things that we can do to make sure that we're addressing microaggressions in the workplace. One of them is if we're in a privileged position, that we're sharing power and resources. And what that looks like is if I'm in a meeting that I know other people may not have access to, that I am bringing up other people's ideas and contributions and giving them credit for those contributions and their ideas, so that they have an opportunity to be kind of uplifted in these other powerful meetings. When companies are engaging in hiring, promotions, and performance assessments, that they're taking time to revisit and review implicit bias principles to make sure that bias isn't creeping into why they're hiring someone, or why some people are being promoted and some people are not, and that they're assessing performance based on fairness and not based off of stereotypical bias. The other thing that people can do is be women that speak up for other women. There's ways that we can band together and elevate each other. So for example, if we're in a situation where we see Sally Sue is being talked over, she's made an idea and people just let it fall to the floor, and then someone else, a man, starts talking and basically says her same idea, but is trying to claim credit for it. Someone else can pipe up and say, you know what, that is a good idea that Sally just said 10 minutes ago. I'm glad that you brought it back up. We definitely should do that. There's a way that we can connect it when we see that happening. The other thing is that, not all women are friends and not all men are enemies. We go more by the vibe of that person and the spirit of that person. And whether it's a man or a woman, if they are willing to be an ally, that we bring them in and embrace them if they are trying to engage in allyship. So I said a woman, but a man can also do that too. If he sees that a woman's idea is being taken in a meeting, he can bring it back to that and say, yeah, I remember Rebecca said that, 2 days ago, and I'm glad that that got brought back up. I think that was a good idea to do that. The other thing that we can do is just to kind of acknowledge that in general, when we're thinking about microaggressions, folks that are in marginalized groups, a lot of times they don't get the compliments or a lot of the benefit of the doubt that others get. And even here in the United States, I don't know about other places, but I know here in the United States, there's been studies that have come out that Black and brown children actually receive far fewer compliments, but they do receive more disciplinary action starting in preschool. And that just follows right into the workplace, where historically underrepresented groups often are subjected to more scrutiny, less recognition of their demonstrated success, and they're also given less helpful feedback, performance feedback. Also, we see a lot of situations where it takes a longer time for women or people of color to be promoted. And so that's another situation where I was talking about earlier about checking into bias when we're doing calibrations for promotions and for hiring and for performance assessment, that we're checking to make sure from a racial standpoint, from a gender standpoint, are things being done in a way that makes sense. And then another way to combat microaggressions in the workplace is micro-validations. And that basically means that it's an equally subtle but powerful action of language that demonstrates affirmation, encouragement, and acknowledging and affirming someone's experience of a microaggression, and giving encouragement and feedback in the form of a sincere compliment. So if we think about microaggressions as being little insults that are being thrown at people, micro-validations are ways of kind of combating that by uplifting people, encouraging them, pointing out the good things that they're doing in the workplace, and also having a confidence in their work, and also encouraging them, because some of the things that have to do with microaggressions have to do with having low expectations of certain people. You expect high things from certain people, but then you don't expect certain things from some other people. And that looks like asking them to do lower level tasks, or micromanaging their work, or giving feedback based on a negative group stereotype. These are all microaggressions that can, make someone doubt their skills or their potential. And then also we can just look at just voicing appreciation for everyone's contributions. If people are contributing in a way, you want to just, give them a gratitude or thanks. And sometimes even something small is just acknowledging someone's presence. I have had cases where people have complained to me about they're a woman or a person of color, and they come into a room and no one even acknowledges their presence. And they notice that. And it's not that hard to just say hello to someone, or to acknowledge them, or to ask them about their weekend like you do with anyone else. And so those are just some of the small little things that we can do. But a lot of the things that are going to really move this towards being a relic of the past is working on wanting to share resource and power. And that is one of the problems that we've always had in the United States, that there's a reluctance to do that. There's never really a desire to want to, to share the pie. There's always a situation where some folks want to hold more of it than they really should, and they want to limit other people's ability to fly and to shine. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about some of these stereotypes and bias that are being stated. They're being used as a way to continue to oppress. And so the more that we can do to acknowledge that there is an issue with people not wanting to share, and not really wanting to be in a situation where everyone has a good opportunity to be successful, and that they're really being assessed on their actual ability, and not on people's perception of their ability, or people's fear that if too many people from the underrepresented group, get too many of these leadership positions, there's not going to be room for, my group to do something. Once we can get past that, hopefully we can get to a place where everyone is able to be able to achieve their highest level that they want to achieve, and not be limited in any way. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. I totally agree with you that it's important to checking into the biases that we have, or to see that if the company's hiring process or the promotion process involve microaggressions. And I think I have heard a term like unconscious bias training is also this kind of training to help the companies to recognize if there is any bias involved in their, like even the meeting rooms, in the like everyday discussion, or in even the way how we call our colleagues, a guy, a lady, or something like that. And also, I really like the idea you talk about the micro-validation, because people who usually attacked by microaggressions may gradually lack of confidence, or lack of self-esteem. So it's really important to validate their what their contribution are, and also to recognize their existence, and to give them encouragement. These are also a very good way to counter microaggressions. Yeah, so thank you to our three speakers for sharing your valuable experiences and coping strategies from the aspects of entrepreneurial environment, social media, campus, and workplace. And before the QA session, can we take a group photo together first? Yeah? Yeah, please, our audience, please all open your camera so that we can see your energetic face. And then we can take a group photo together. So, are you ready to, our audience? you are invited to open your camera so that we can take a group photo. Okay, Mom. Okay, so okay, so first we would like you to show a heart, whether it's like this or this can all be fine. So just choose the heart you like and we can take a picture. Are you ready? Okay, great. And the second one, we want to say no to gender microaggressions. So like this, say no. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. We will send the pictures to you. Thank you all. Now you can close your camera for our audience. Okay, now it's time to move on to the QA session. If you come up with any questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat box. And for our audience watching the Chinese live broadcast on YouTube, you can also submit your questions through the Slido link. If your question is for a specific speaker, please mention their name in the question. And for our Taiwanese audience, if you don't want to use English, you can also use Chinese. It's okay to type in Chinese in the Slido. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Okay, while we are waiting for questions to come out, I would like to use my privilege as the moderator to ask the first question. Okay, so the reason why microaggressions are difficult to solve is because in some situations, the perpetrator may claim that this is not my intention at all. You are too sensitive. This is not what I mean. And this will make the victims doubt themselves and even deny their own experience. They will question themselves. So and that's also why the microaggressions can persist. Is it because people just deny the existence of the microaggressions? So are there any good ways to respond to these kind of reactions, or to make the perpetrators realize their verbal expression or behavior is demeaning and make us uncomfortable? I believe some of you have already talked about that. You have to start the conversation with the perpetrator to discuss with him or her what is the best way to express that can make us feel more comfortable. But in addition to this kind of way, do you have any other ideas?
Can I just go first?
Okay, yeah, please, Annie.
So, so that question, I assume that's a scenario that we still want to keep the relationship with the person who gave the microaggression. Otherwise, we just go to the law. So it won't be a problem that we have to deal with the other's emotion. But so this is the slide I want to share with everyone, because sometimes we don't want to ruin the relationship between the person and us. So the way how I express myself is like I spent some time on learning nonviolent communication skill and the iMessage skill. Combined of this basically is just to point out these 4 different things during the conversation, including observation, like what just happened. When I heard someone said, when I heard you said blah blah blah, and then express the feeling later on. Just say, so the way how the time I heard you said something, I felt unrespected, or I felt sad, or I felt shameful. And then later on we can add on the needs. So I would probably say because I really need some time to focus on my presentation and my proposal. So I really wanna like change the topic to something else. That could be my need, express that. And also we can put on the request to the others. So to let others know what and how they can reform their words, how they can treat us differently in order to meet our need. Because sometimes they do have good intention, but they just did it wrong. And they didn't really know what's the best solution and what's the best way to approach our common goals. So I would say these 4 things that come from nonviolent communication and IMESH is start from what I need, what I feel, what I heard, and then later on put on the goals, put on the request in between. That's the way how would I address those things when it happens on me.
Thank you, Annie. And Yachun, you also want to respond?
Yeah, okay. I'll still speak Chinese, okay?
Yes. I often jokingly say to my friends that, well, victims are really busy. They're occupied all the time. They had to heal from the experience, at the same time keep social harmony, and they also try to avoid harm to others. But have you ever thought about the issue that you are the victim in the first place? So increasingly, I feel that when it comes to microaggressions, of course, you can take the case to court. But in our daily life, in our interpersonal communication, maybe the perpetrator should assume more responsibility to recognize he or she is the person to change. It's not the victims who have to think about different ways to care about others' feeling, to be empathetic. Why? Because, as you know, there are a lot of indigenous people or students in Hualien in Eastern Taiwan. And previously, there was an incident called Xihuan Na. They actually use a chemical formula to make a label of a drink, which sounds like a derogatory remark to the indigenous people. We asked the indigenous students, are they mad? Well, they say, if you don't care, you won't get mad. But don't you think that's really strange? Because you'd be thinking having a bad good life, but the perpetrator just doesn't change his or her behavior. They still do actually the same thing again and again. Sometimes we are too focused on avoiding conflict or aggression, but the perpetrator is the person behind the aggression. As I grow older, I care more and more about interpersonal boundaries. For example, you can, of course, rightly claim that, okay, this is my boundary. Of course, you don't harm other.
Tiffany, do you also want to respond, or you?
I'm okay because I see there's quite a few questions in the chat, so I'm okay. on
Okay,
this.
thank you. Thank you. So I think any slide is really useful. So maybe Annie, you can also share with us after this discussion, because I think everyone can use your slide to think about how they can cope with this kind of situation. And what Yachun says is also very, I think it's difficult to do for some people, but it's very important that it's not the victims who should be blamed, and they don't need to be afraid of the conflicts, because it is the person who offend you should be changed, not ourselves. So, and this also requires a lot of confidence to do that and a lot of strength. So again, empowerment is really important. I think we also need more this kind of like empowerment training for girls. Yeah. And also, okay, so in the chat box, there are a few questions. Let me see. Okay, there is a question for Yachun. I would like to ask a question for Yachun. When there is a gender-related incident in school, such as sexual harassment, the way teachers deal with the incident may also involve gender microaggressions. I'm interested to know that Are there any tools or teaching materials that can increase teachers' awareness or help teachers understand how to avoid gender microaggressions to prevent secondary harm on the victims?
OK，事情是这样，就
Well, let me put it this way. I mentioned that in the past 20 years, we have made a progress in our Gender Equality Education Act. We try to build a better campus environment. However, we haven't really touched upon the training of teachers. So on the level of university education, we haven't really included gender equality education into that. So this is something that we need to start now. I think all competent authorities have to be mobilized in this. We have to make sure that for all the teachers and professors, they are equipped with this awareness and skills. In addition, they also need to have on-the-job training. They need to take gender equality education during their service. Otherwise, we see a lot of problems in university. In the interest of time, I'm not able to share with you too many details, but however, I think that as time goes by, we're able to phase out those unqualified instructors. And this is rather subtle. You have to be there to really witness that happening. For some schools, they have a reporting system on students who are romantically involved. But when it comes to the reporting of instructors, teachers, and professors, they have all sorts of mechanisms to protect the educators. Those seem legit, but you know that they are unfair to students if you are there on site. So I think we have to re-examine all kinds of systems and all kinds of cases. We also have to review the past cases to really identify microaggressions, to really understand how that affects our systems.
Explanation. And I think you have mentioned that the teachers' gender equality education has been put in teachers' training. And although it's just start now, but it's never late. Yeah. Okay, so the next question. Dear Annie, thank you for your sharing. I have a question for you. Now we often see comments on social media posts filled with overt or subtle gender microaggressions, which sometimes lead to ongoing confrontations. As witnesses to such comments, do you have any suggestions on how we can dismantle the microaggressive language in a rational and effective way, and also support those affected? I think this you and Yachun already pretty much responded to this kind of question, but do you have anything to add, or is it okay?
So there's one thing I want to add on is like education is so important, not just gender equality education, also like trauma-informed education would definitely help every one of us to understand a bit more about how we can treat the survivors in a better way, how we could prevent the secondary trauma to show up again through the words. So that's the one thing I want to add on. So if people are interested in this, it's definitely would be helpful to just search for more information about the trauma info education.
Yeah, education is really fundamental. So Yachun, your part is really important. Yeah. Okay, there's a question for Tiffany, which is very interesting. For Tiffany, now under Donald Trump's administration, all the DEI programs and related work are terminated or even banned. How do you see this situation? Are there any alternative ways to keep promoting DEI?
So I thank you for this question. It is an interesting time that we're in the United States. What I would say as it relates to microaggressions and inclusion in the workplace is that, to me, that's about basic civility and just basic respect of other individuals. So regardless of, what the external atmosphere is telling us, there's still going to be workplaces where different types of people with different races, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different beliefs are still going to be working together. So what I never really understood about dismantling it or getting rid of it, that doesn't get rid of the fact that the workplace is still the workplace. And so what it does is get rid of policies and ways that people are being helped to be able to get along with each other. And it also leads to a company opening itself up to more litigation and possible lawsuits, and also discomfort from employees. Because from an employee standpoint, if you're at a company where you see that they're dismantling certain programs, and a lot of times those programs are the ones that are helping some employees to feel welcome in the workplace, that may not be a workplace that you choose to stay in. And also, I don't know if you all have been following here in the US, there's quite a few boycotts that are happening around those companies that decided to dismantle those particular teams. Because as we're seeing, a lot of consumers, they're concerned about, if this particular company wouldn't hire me, why would I want to spend money at that company? And so time will tell how those boycotts turn out. Last time I checked, there did seem to be kind of a deficit as to where some of those people were as it related to the stock market. I think the other issue that I see is that kind of the mentality around removing those particular policies. I think there's an argument that, it's because we want there to be fairness, and that these particular programs lead to more unfairness because now we're prioritizing or favoring a particular group of people, and we want to be in a colorblind area. And what people fail to understand is that when we're thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, they're not just race-based. A lot of women were able to get a leg up and to get a chance because of these programs. And not only that, it also helped older workers, people who were over the age of 40, veterans who had problems getting a job, and people with disabilities. But again, those kind of get brushed up under the rug, and they just want to talk about it's a racial situation. And then the last thing I want to say as it relates to this is that there's been studies that have come out. There's a company, McKinsey and Company, and they have a report that they give every year, and they talk about profitability and as it relates to companies who have diversity in their leadership teams and their executive teams. And they've been consistently coming out over year after year that companies that have women in their leadership and people of color consistently perform better than those companies that are monolithic, where everybody just looks the same. And that makes sense because even in nature, if we're thinking about it, diversity is what encourages things to continue to flourish, right? Because it's a diversity of thought, people have different perspectives, and it makes everything better because people have a lot of different ideas. If everyone's cookie cutter kind of saying the same thing, what we've talked from a business perspective is that does not lead to better outcomes financially. And so it's interesting. I'm going to continue to do what I do as far as my microaggression training. I will be honest, I have had a company, a school, actually university, I had a training that was scheduled for earlier this month, and they canceled because of some things that happened. And they were, sharing with me, they were really disappointed, but that's what was happening with them. But I also have had other people who continue to reach out to me and seek my services. What I will say is that, like I said, from my standpoint, whether you call it diversity, equity, or inclusion, the main fact of it is that we're wanting people to be respected in the workplace, to be treated with respect, to be treated with civility. And I don't understand why that's ever a controversy. To me, that seems like that's common sense, but that's where we are right now. So I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I really love your answer. And because I also think that it's just, we have to go back to our basic interpersonal relationship, the respect, the recognition is it's just the basic our lives. Yeah. So, and also like I think people's awareness is very fundamental after hearing you say that people are boycotting those companies because they have the sense of diversity and inclusion and they want to protect their own rights. So also like how to raise people's awareness is a key issue. And once they have this kind of awareness, they can together also build a more equal society, although the government may have their own way to do things. Yeah. So thank you for your answer. And now I see that we have some questions from Slido, which is from our Taiwanese participants. So it's in Chinese, but I think we have the English interpreter. So I think it will be fine. Okay. But now I will switch to Chinese.
Here we have a question. It's about the Jianzhong, Taipei Municipal Jianguo High School. She mentioned that she's very disappointed in the schools because she has two sons who are currently in junior high school and elementary school. And sometimes she hears her son swearing. They seem like set phrases or something emotional, but moms still don't want their kids to swear like this. But if we have this entire area where you simply don't care about using swear words, do you have any suggestions in terms of how we can improve this? There are other questions.
Collectively, they will be quicker. Okay. Another question.
Another question is, if the microaggression comes from your direct supervisor, how do you let your supervisor know that this is inappropriate? And another question is, how can we allow our peers to understand that you have classmates who are teenage mothers? If you do have those as classmates, will you have the situation where they have some expectations about being a mother, or will they use pregnancy as a way to keep their boyfriend? How can we ensure that people can have more sense of responsibility when it comes to the topic of pregnancy? Another is about the job employment of senior female. When they leave the workplace, a lot of times after they come back, they may face discrimination because of their age, because they have left the workplace for a long time. And employers have the stereotypes and biases. So a lot of times, if they are going to be employed again, they can only choose a low-paying job or low-skilled job, and that will affect their economic security as they grow older. Do you have any thoughts on this in terms of how we can have breakthroughs? The last question is, in your own experience as NGO workers, educators, if we're going to be more actively engaging the social public to value this importance of this topic, what kind of titles, appeals, or forms will you use as an incentives to encourage the public to understand this topic more, to let them know that this is a very important issue for them as well?
Questions, but maybe I will turn to like Yachun, first Yachun, Annie and Tiffany, and you can take turns to answer those questions.
OK
Okay, Yachun first, please.
OK， 那个关于建中事件。
Okay, about this Jianguo High School incident, I briefly talked about how we talk to kids in the workshop at our organization. Maybe that will give you peace of mind. There are actions we can take. And if we sit down, talk to the kids in a structural way, we found that kids sometimes simply don't understand what the words that they say. So that also reflects that a lot of times microaggressions come from ignorance. A kid once told me that they use this N word, and I told him that this is a very serious word you cannot use in the States. And the kid said that, oh, then we simply don't use it in the States. I was shocked because in Taiwan, we don't have anti-discrimination act. So it seems that we are neglecting the importance of this because we don't have a legal guideline to refer to. I will skip the one about the workplace because I have a lot to say about the campus, and we only have limited time. How do we deal with this teenage mother on campus? Well, a lot of times we are concerned about the lack of responsibility shouldered by our kids or teenagers. Do they know what their responsibilities are? Well, in the academic-oriented campus, kids think that their responsibility is studying. But after finishing their studies, what is their responsibility? I'm not so sure they really know. So we have to really review this entire academic-oriented environment. Well, actually, we have a very, very low percentage of teenage mother. Only 3 in 1,000. So it's very, very, very low because we have only a few teenage mothers. And simply because of that, they are discriminated against. They think that it is your problem. It is because you do this that we have this issue on campus. Because we have a set expectations of our kids. But it happens. This happens, especially with our low birth rate in Taiwan. Well, you can talk to your kids about this, what they have in mind about giving birth. A lot of times they have this very negative idea about giving birth because, well, if you ask just young people, teenagers, they will say that I don't want to give birth. I don't want to be a mother in the future. We need to have good sex education and emotional or intelligence or empathy education so that we can guide our students, our kids, to understand more about what it is to be a human being.
Last but not least, the question about what NGO can do to raise people's awareness. Well, in the age of social media, we need to increase our social media presence to engage a broader audience. So the way we do it is that every day we need to talk about relevant issues in the public space. But in the event of high-profile cases, for example, surrogacy, or public celebrities engaging in sexual scandals, actually, you need to reach out. This is the best time for you to reach out to your targeted audience. But it will be too late if you start talking about the issue only until incidents arise.
Annie, please.
Okay, so I'll just quick answer about the last question about how the NGO workers can advocate the whole issue. So the suggestion of the strategy I use, or I would offer, is to let the public to participate because the advocacy. So once you let everyone talks, you let everyone share about their own experience, they have a channel to speak up for themselves. Then you will be able to get the public to focus on this issue easier than you just let yourself talk more. So the way how we do, or the way how I do before, is like we write a lot of columns. I wrote a lot of columns, blogs, sharing a lot of personal stories, and also invite the others to speak their stories. And also we created a board game which can let everyone to speak up themselves based on the sexual violence experiences. So that's the approach that we would use mostly, just let everyone speak up for themselves more.
Thank you, Annie. And Tiffany, would you like to respond?
I would just say quickly, as far as if your manager is the person that is engaging in microaggressions, that if you feel comfortable, you probably should try to engage with them directly and using the process that I shared previously about, I feel that this was said, and talk about the impact that it had on you, to try not to be accusatory in that conversation, but to just basically focus more on the impact of what they said, and then to kind of wait to see what is their response. If you get a negative response, then I think the next thing to do probably would be to go to HR, or maybe go to your manager's manager to explain that situation. Because if you are in a situation where something is said or things continue to be said and then you don't say anything, it does continue to be, can be very hurtful. And it can be very damaging to you as a person. And it's okay. You have the right to speak up if someone is mistreating you. You don't have to sit there and take that. And also that person is an opportunity for them to learn that they need to be thoughtful about the things that they're saying, that it can be offensive or can be perceived as a bias that they have against you.
Thank you, Tiffany. So since we only have 5 minutes left, we have to close the QA session and move on to the last part that I would like to invite each of our speakers to use 1 minute to share your last thoughts, echoing our slogan, gender-based microaggressions out. Or if you'd like to add anything, this is also the time. And can I invite Yachun to be the first one?
Okay. Okay, thanks, Cecilia. I think for me, the most important thing is since microaggressions are so micro, on the personal level, we must keep in mind that anyone can be the one who hurt other people, including ourselves. Sorry is not an easy word to say, but it is important that it might be the key for mutual understanding. By raising our awareness of cultural differences and all kinds of stereotypes, we start to learn why people are angry or feeling assaulted. Then we started to try to make things right.
Thank you, Yachun. And Tiffany, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I think the last thing I would just share is just that, and we didn't talk about this a lot, that there's a financial aspect to treating people with dignity and respect. If that's the kind of workplace that you're presenting, then you're going to always have an overabundance of people that are trying to apply and trying to be at that type of workplace. The other part of this too is the diversity of information that you're getting from all those different people that work there. The perspectives that they bring are also going to contribute to the kind of customers that you're able to attract and to keep. And so this whole conversation about how we're, engaging with one another, not only is it a benefit just in the workplace, but it's a benefit financially to companies that try to make the decision to do that. And then also on an individual level, when I make a decision that I'm going to engage in a way that's respectful of other people, there's a way that I carry myself and I think about myself in a way that I move within the world. When I'm acting in a way where it's like, I don't care about anybody but myself, I'm just whatever, that's also a way that I'm moving in the world. And so these are going to have to be individual discussions, company-wide discussions, community-wide, nationwide discussions. And that's one that the US is happening at this time, a nationwide discussion about what kind of people do we want to be, what kind of nation that we want to be. And then then when we look at this is going to be what our future looks like. So I'm just very thankful that I was on here to share the US perspective. It was a pleasure to be with both of you all. Thank you all for sharing such personal stories. I learned a lot from being on this panel with you two. And I just wish everyone else the best and hope that they learned a little bit of something about the US today from my speech.
Thank you, Tiffany. And finally, Annie, please.
So just like what I just shared, I really hope everyone is able to be listened carefully, no matter how young they are, how old they are, and what gender they are. And one day we might become survivor on some circumstances. We might all face different type of microaggressions. But once those microaggressions put a lot of bad feelings on us, like shame or self-doubt, but we have to remember that when they put those feelings, those shame on us, we don't have to really carry those shame on us for the rest of the life. So we can definitely always decide how we want to live our life, how we can react to those microaggressions. We have support, we have resources out there. So don't forget to seek those support to help us recover from those damage, recover from those trauma. and there'll be a chance to just make things right.
Thank you, Annie. This is a very good conclusion. So thank you today for Yachun, Tiffany, and Annie. I really enjoyed our fruitful discussion. And I also hope discussion can help our audience better understand the different forms of microaggressions and how to cope with and dismantle those microaggressions. Although the session is ending now, our fight against microaggressions goes on. I believe everyone can be influential. So after listening to our speakers' inspiring talks, we can further apply the knowledge and the practical approaches to our everyday life, whether at home, on campus, or in the workplace, to eliminate gender-based microaggressions and to build a more diverse and inclusive environment free of discrimination. Thank you all for your participation. Let's continue to work together to make changes and achieve the real equality for all. Thank you again. Wish you a great weekend and see you next year. Bye-bye.